The spring wind carried a sharp chill across the Montana plains as Willow McKenzie knelt beside 3 fresh graves. Her fingers trembled against the wooden crosses, her tears soaking into the new dirt. These were the last pieces of her family. Her father, her brother James, and James's wife Mary, all taken by fever in a single week. Now at 22, Willow stood alone on a broken homestead, with nothing but memories and grief heavy enough to crush her. She didn't hear Isaac Blackwood approach. All she heard was the wind and her own sobbing. Isaac had been riding the trail for hours when the sound reached him, a woman's cry, raw and hurting. It pulled him off his horse before he even knew why. At 30, Isaac had lived most of his life drifting from ranch to ranch. He was used to keeping his distance from trouble. But something in that sound told him this was different. He walked slowly toward her, holding his hat in his hand as a sign of respect. Willow lifted her head when his shadow stretched across the graves. Her auburn hair was loose, blowing wildly in the wind. Her face was pale from crying, eyes swollen and full of devastation. "Ma'am," Isaac said softly, "are you in need of assistance?" Willow stared at him for a long moment before answering. "They're gone." Her voice cracked painfully. "All of them. My father, my brother, my sister-in-law. The fever took them so fast." Isaac swallowed hard. He had seen plenty of loss in the West, but the sight of one young woman mourning 3 graves alone hit him in a way he didn't expect. "I'm mighty sorry," he said. No one should face something like this alone. Willow wiped her face, but new tears came. "What am I supposed to do? I can't run the homestead alone. I can't even think straight." Isaac looked toward the small cabin in the distance, the leaning barn, the tired fencing, the half-plowed field. He knew right away this place needed 2 strong hands at least, maybe more. A lone woman out here faced dangers from storms, sickness, and sometimes worse. "You have family back east?" he asked gently. Willow shook her head. "No one. It was just us. Father brought us here 3 years ago to start over after Mother died." She let out a bitter laugh. "Some fresh start this turned out to be." Isaac shifted uncomfortably, dust swirling around his boots. He could easily have tipped his hat and ridden away. But leaving her here, broken, grieving, and alone, felt wrong. The sun was dropping lower behind the mountains. "You shouldn't stay out here after dark," he said. "Let me walk you back to your cabin." Willow hesitated, studying him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, weathered by sun and trail dust. His clothes were worn, but clean, and something steady lived in his eyes. With her world falling apart, trust felt dangerous. But she didn't have another choice. "All right," she whispered. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." "Isaac," he corrected gently. "And you?" Willow McKenzie." He offered his hand, and she rose shakily to her feet. Together they walked toward the cabin, Isaac leading his horse beside them. Every step made Willow feel the weight of her loneliness more sharply. She had lost not only her family, but her future. "I'll have to sell," she murmured. "But who would buy a place this far from town? And where would I go?" Her voice trembled again. Isaac didn't answer right away. He could feel something unspoken tugging at him. A pull he didn't recognize, something stronger than the drifting life he was used to. By the time they reached the porch, the thought had formed fully in his mind. "Miss McKenzie," he began carefully, "I know I'm a stranger to you, but I'm handy with tools. I've worked ranches all across Montana. I could help you get this place in order, at least until you decide what to do next." Willow blinked, startled. "Why would you offer that?" Isaac removed his hat again, running a hand through his dark hair. "Because I've spent years moving from place to place, never seeing a job through to the end. Maybe it's time I stayed somewhere long enough to finish what I start." He didn't tell her the truth. He didn't fully understand himself. Seeing her cry beside those graves cracked something open in him. A feeling he thought he'd buried long ago. Willow looked down at her hands. "I can't pay you. The farm hasn't turned a profit. "Room and board is plenty," he said, "and a corner of the barn for my horse." It went against everything she'd been taught to accept a strange man's help, but she was out of options and his offer felt sincere. 2 weeks, she said finally. "Help me for 2 weeks. After that, I'll figure something out." Isaac nodded and shook her hand. 2 weeks. The moment her small hand settled into his, a quiet understanding passed between them, something neither of them spoke aloud but both felt. Morning came too bright and too soon. Willow moved through the cabin, preparing cornbread and coffee, her hands still shaking from grief and fear. She hadn't slept, not with a stranger in her barn, and the weight of her whole future pressing on her. Isaac stepped inside just as she set the cups down. His hair was damp from washing at the pump. He looked cleaner but still rugged, the kind of man who had lived more on the trail than under a roof. "Good morning, Miss McKenzie," he said. "Good morning. Please, sit. It's simple food, but it's all I have." "Simple is fine," Isaac said, taking a seat. They ate in silence, the tension between grief and uncertainty heavy in the room. When Willow finally spoke, her voice trembled. "There's so much work to do, I don't know where to begin." "Start with what matters most," Isaac said. "What needs fixin' first?" Willow let out a slow breath. "The roof leaks. The north field needs plowing. The chicken coop is falling apart." "The well pump sticks." Isaac nodded once. "The roof first. Can't have you getting soaked in your own home." After breakfast, they walked the land together. Willow showed him the creek, the fields, the old mule, the chickens, the tired fences. She told him how her father dreamed of turning this place into a thriving homestead. Isaac listened quietly, taking note of every weakness in the buildings and every strength in the land. When he climbed onto the roof to start repairs, Willow watched him from below. He worked fast and steady, replacing broken shingles and ceiling leaks. By late afternoon, he was finishing just as dark clouds gathered. "Storm's coming," he called down. Willow gasped. "The garden! I need to cover the seedlings." They sprinted together across the yard just as the first raindrops fell. They covered the vegetable beds with canvas and ran back to the porch as the sky opened. Rain poured in sheets. "Thank you," Willow said breathlessly. Those plants were James's pride. "He had a good eye for growing," Isaac replied gently. They stood side by side, watching rain soak the land. For the first time since the fever took her family, Willow felt something other than fear. She felt the beginning of hope. "Would you join me for supper tonight?" she asked quietly. Isaac nodded. "I'd be honored." They didn't know it yet, but this stormy evening would be the first step toward a home neither would ever want to leave. The storm passed in the night, leaving the Montana air cool and washed clean by morning. Willow stepped outside at first light, her boots sinking into the damp earth as she checked the garden. The canvas had held. The seedlings were safe. For the first time in many days, she felt a small breath of relief. Isaac came from the barn just as she stood, brushing dirt from her hands. His horse neighed softly behind him, and he gave it a gentle pat before walking toward her. "Garden made it through," Willow said. He smiled. "Told you it would. Plants are tougher than most folks think." They shared a simple breakfast and then began their day. Isaac worked on the barn walls, reinforcing weak boards and patching holes. Willow fed the animals, refreshed the water troughs, and gathered eggs. They kept moving, working long hours, saying little but falling into a rhythm that felt oddly natural. Two people connected by loss, survival, and the same stretch of sky. By late afternoon, Willow called up to him where he hammered along the barn roof. "Isaac, we should stop soon. The clouds are building again." He glanced at the horizon. "A few more nails, then I'm done." Willow held the ladder while he climbed down. As his boots hit the ground, she studied him closely. "You worked yourself too hard today." Quote, "Idle hands make for long thoughts," he said quietly. Willow nodded. "Thank you for everything." "Just keeping my word," Isaac replied. But they both knew it was more than that. Inside the cabin that evening, they shared stew and fresh cornbread. Isaac ate with quiet respect, always waiting for Willow to begin before he touched his spoon. It was clear he'd been raised with manners, even if his trail-worn life had roughened him. "You mentioned your father was a teacher," Isaac said. "Back in Ohio." Willow nodded. "He loved books and believed people could learn their way through any hardship. He wanted a new life out here, something meaningful." "He raised you strong," Isaac said. Willow's eyes lowered. "I'm trying to be." A long silence settled, soft but heavy with unspoken truth. That night, Isaac slept in the barn again. Willow lay awake listening to the wind and thinking about the strange man who had walked into her grief without asking anything in return. She didn't know him well, yet she felt safer with him here than she had since her family died. The next days passed quickly. Isaac repaired the leaking roof, mended fences, patched the chicken coop, and reinforced the barn. Willow planted more seeds, cleaned the cabin, and tended the animals. They began sharing stories as they worked. Willow about her family, Isaac about the long roads he'd traveled. On the 10th day, rain kept them trapped inside. The soft patter against the window made the cabin feel smaller, quieter. Isaac helped Willow sort through her father's papers. That's when he found the loan document. Willow froze as he read it. "A loan? My father never said anything about a loan." "It's from Helena, $200. Due by the end of the month," Isaac said slowly, "and if it isn't repaid, they can claim part of your land." Willow sank onto the chair, her face draining of color. No, we can't lose the land. This is all I have left." Quote. Isaac knelt beside her, laying the paper gently on the table. "We'll find a way." "How?" she whispered. "I'll figure it out." The next morning, he rode to town. Willow watched him go, the worry in her chest sharper than she expected. She busied herself with chores, but her mind stayed fixed on Isaac until she saw him return near sunset. He dismounted quickly. "What did you learn?" she asked. He told her everything. The cattle drives delayed for weeks, the shopkeeper's warning about Harlan Weber, the wealthy man behind the loan, and Wade Preston, owner of Triple P Ranch, offering to buy her land. Willow felt sick. "Sell the homestead?" "He said he'd pay fair," Isaac added, though his voice held doubt. "And leave? Go where? Do what?" Willow's voice trembled. "This land is my father's dream. It's my last connection to my family." Isaac set the supplies down and met her eyes. "Then we'll save it, somehow." The decision weighed on both of them that night. After supper, they sat on the porch watching the fading light turn the sky orange and gold. Isaac broke the silence. "We could ride to Helena, try talking to Weber ourselves." "Both of us?" Willow asked. "I won't let you face him alone." Quote. Something in his voice steadied her, even as fear tugged at her chest. "All right," she said. "We ride in 2 days." Their journey to Helena was long and muddy. They spent 3 days on the road, sleeping under a wagon cover, sharing cold biscuits and coffee in the mornings. Willow hadn't traveled since leaving Ohio. The roughness of the road jarred her bones, but Isaac kept the pace gentle. He told her stories at night to distract her from worry, and she grew to look forward to the low rumble of his voice drifting through the dusk. Helena overwhelmed her. The noise, the crowds, the tall brick buildings. Isaac stayed close beside her, his presence grounding her. They checked into a modest hotel, washed up, and made their way to Weber's office. The man behind the desk was not what either expected. Small, slight, with sharp eyes behind wire spectacles. He spoke politely enough, but there was no kindness in him. "An extension," Willow said, keeping her voice steady. 3 months. We only need time." "Impossible," Weber said. "Your father agreed to the terms. The debt stands." Quote. "We're working the land," Isaac added. "It's coming along." "Sentiment does not change numbers," Weber replied. The room felt colder then. Willow forced herself to breathe. "Please, just a little more time." Weber adjusted his spectacles. 1 month, no more, with 15% additional interest. Willow's stomach dropped. Isaac's jaw clenched in anger. "That's robbery," he snapped. "That's business," Weber replied calmly. Willow placed a hand on Isaac's arm, calming him. Her voice was soft but firm. "We accept." Outside the bank, Isaac shook his head. "He's using the loan to force your hand, Willow." "No," she said. "We will find a way. I won't lose my home." The ride back was quiet. Too quiet. Willow seemed distant, bracing herself. Isaac sensed her pulling away, and it hurt more than he wanted to admit. By the time they reached the homestead, something had shifted between them. They were still working together, still trying to save the land, but the unspoken question hung between them. Would Isaac stay? Or would he drift away once his 2 weeks ended? He didn't have an answer. Not yet. But the days ahead would force one from him. The next days passed with a heavy weight hanging over the homestead. Willow tried to keep busy, tending the animals, watering crops, mending torn fabric, doing anything to keep her mind from the ticking clock. Isaac worked long hours at Wade Preston's ranch, then rode back each evening to help with the homestead. Every night he returned more tired than the last. But every night Willow still left a lamp burning in the window so he would know he wasn't returning to an empty place. With the loan deadline only weeks away, worry settled into Willow's chest like a stone. She tried not to show it, but Isaac saw every crack in her smile. He saw the way she stared at the creek, the fields, the cabin, memorizing everything she might lose. One evening he found her sitting on the porch, staring toward the graves on the hill. "Long day?" he asked gently. "Every day feels long now," Willow said, her voice quiet. "I keep thinking how Father would have handled this, or James. They'd know what to do." Quote. Isaac sat beside her. "You've done more than most folks could in your shoes." Quote. She didn't answer. Instead, she asked the question that had been living on the edge of her heart. "Isaac, will you stay after all this is done?" Quote. He froze. For once, he had no trail-worn answers ready to offer. He had been a drifting man for so long, riding from job to job to avoid the ache of belonging anywhere. "I don't know," he said honestly. The hurt in Willow's eyes cut deeper than any storm he'd ever faced. "I understand," she whispered. "You've already done more than enough." But he could hear the tremble she tried to hide. For the next few days, Willow kept her distance. She was polite, but she no longer lingered in conversation. Isaac felt the gap between them widening, and it gnawed at him every night he tried to sleep in the barn loft. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to drift anymore. He wanted this, the land, the peace, and her. But wanting something and being brave enough to choose it were two different battles, and Isaac had never been good at the second. 5 days before the loan came due, he received news from the telegraph office. His savings from Cheyenne had arrived. $70, enough to complete the amount they needed. He rode back fast, the spring wind whipping at him. When Willow saw him return, she stepped out of the cabin. "You got something?" she asked. "My savings came through," he said. "We have enough. You can pay Weber." Willow's eyes softened. Relief washed over her features, but she still shook her head. "I can't take your savings. That's your future." "My future is what I choose," Isaac said quietly. He didn't say anything else, but Willow saw the truth in his eyes. Together they counted every dollar, every coin. Between Isaac's savings, his wages, and the money Willow had earned selling eggs and milk, they had what they needed. Enough to pay Weber by the new deadline. 3 days before the due date, they rode toward Helena again. This time, they didn't ride as two people barely holding their lives together. They rode like partners. They paid Weber in full. He marked the loan as satisfied and handed Willow the receipt. She held the paper against her chest like it was the last piece of her family saved from the flames. As they left the office, something loosened in Willow's heart for the first time in weeks. On the ride home, Isaac finally spoke the words she had been longing to hear. "Willow," he said quietly, "I want to stay, if you'll have me." The breath she released trembled with joy. "I hoped you would," she whispered. When they reached the homestead, the sunset painted the sky gold. Isaac helped Willow down from the wagon, their hands lingering. The land around them, once a reminder of fear and loss, now felt like the beginning of something new. That evening, after supper, Isaac stepped close, took her hand, and spoke softly. "I came here planning to stay 2 weeks. That turned into 2 months. Now I want it to turn into a lifetime. Willow McKenzie, would you marry me? Willow's eyes filled with tears, her hand rising to her mouth. Yes, she said, her voice trembling with joy. Yes, Isaac, 1,000 times yes. Quote, he pulled her into his arms, and they kissed under the lantern glow, the world quiet around them. No drifter, no girl alone, just two hearts finding home in each other. The next morning, life felt different. Lighter, brighter. They worked side by side with a new sense of purpose. They told Preston they wouldn't be selling, and Preston surprised them by smiling and offering to buy water rights instead, fairly, honestly. Enough to help them grow their ranch even further. Summer came warm and full, and Isaac and Willow were married in Riverford's small church. Willow wore her mother's dress. Isaac wore a new suit that made him stand straighter than he'd ever stood before. The little church filled with neighbors and ranchers who had watched them fight for their land and find each other in the process. When autumn arrived, the homestead thrived. A larger barn stood proudly beside the old one. The crops were the best the land had ever seen. And the new cabin rose strong and steady, built with Isaac's hands and Willow's planning. One early evening, as the sky turned orange and the first cool wind of fall brushed the fields, Willow stood on the porch. Isaac stepped outside, wiping his hands on a cloth. You're quiet, he said gently. Willow smiled, placing her hand against her stomach. I have news. Isaac's heart skipped. What kind of news? She took his hand and placed it over her belly. Dr. Thornton confirmed it today, she said softly. We'll have a baby in the spring. Isaac's breath caught. He stared at her, eyes shining with something deeper than happiness. Willow, I never thought I'd have a family. You do now, she whispered. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, holding her like she was everything he'd ever searched for. Because she was. Years later, the homestead would grow, the crops would flourish, and their children would run beneath the wide Montana sky. And at the edge of a gentle hill, 3 wooden crosses would remain, silent reminders of the day a cowboy found a grieving girl and chose to stand beside her. A reminder that even in the deepest sorrow, love can take root and build a home where no one ever has to be alone again.